Yeah, I think we can start now. Thanks again being here today. My name is Niels Wegner, Commercial Product Owner for Marine and Offshore. I'm very happy to see you here, being here so many people, even though you could have seen maybe the Olympic Games or something, but I'm pretty sure you will win here today and get some valuable insights on the cybersecurity part. So today we will address a major challenge in the marine industry. It's the cybersecurity, and we will also have a look how to respond in case something occurs. So with me today, my great colleagues, Panayotis Anastasio. He's M&O Cybersecurity Strategy Lead. And also with us, Luke Fletcher. He's Bureau Veritas Cybersecurity Principal Crisis Management Consultant. So today we will explore real maritime threats. We will look into maritime challenges. We will look specifically in vulnerabilities in marine operation and how attackers exploit them. We will also look, of course, into requirement updates, so what's actually ongoing with regulations. And then we will have a short look into how BV can support you with the cybersecurity services. And finally, and then I think that's the most important part, we will do a deep dive into marine cyber crisis management. We will do some nice case studies, get some practical response strategies. So this will not just be a theoretical issue here. So we will get some real world insights, how you can protect your assets, meet regulatory compliance, and then also, of course, maintain operational resilience. That's most important, I would say. So let's get started. Just to let you know, so feel free to raise any questions in the Q&A section. We will get back to it at the end of our session here. The presentation will be available in the handout section right at the end of the session. And then, you, of course, you will also get the recording via email. It's shared to all participants afterwards. So, Panos, it's up to you.
Thank you, Niels, for passing the ball and doing the introduction. Good afternoon or good morning for everyone who is joining today on our webinar. We have been talking since last year, and we have been presenting that we will be doing these frequent webinars to keep you up to date regarding the any kind of threat intelligence updates, any kind of regulatory updates. As we have been discussing for the past 2 years that maritime industry is undergoing a profound digital transformation. So our duty is to keep you up to date, provide you our insights as a classification societies, and see how we can address the threats that are arising. It is well understood that while this digitalization brings efficiency and safety benefits, it significantly expands the cyber attack surface. Our objective today is to provide you as key maritime shareholders with a clear and operational understanding of the current landscape, the regulatory expectations, and how organizations can practically build cyber resilience. So since 2023, we have observed a clear escalation in cybersecurity activity targeting maritime operations. This is no longer limited to financially motivated cybercrime, but increasingly involves stake-backed and hybrid cyber operations. Maritime assets are now considered to be strategic targets due to their role in energy supply, global trade, and critical infrastructure. We are constantly seeing, and I believe that everyone is aware, on frequent GNSS jamming cases, AIS spoofing, satellite communication disruption, and attacks against undersea cables, right? These activities blur the line between cyber incidents, however, and geopolitical conflict. The maritime cyber threat landscape is quite diverse, I would say. Nation state actors target navigation, communication, and positioning systems to create disruption without kinetic actions. At the same time, criminal groups continue to exploit ransomware, phishing, identity theft, and fraud. But we have another player entering the game. Artificial intelligence is now being leveraged to automate social engineering and accelerate ransomware campaigns. We have distributed denial of service attacks that are also used to disrupt port operations and logistic platforms. The key message here is that cyber threats are no longer hypothetical. They are operational realities that require a strong posture and strong protection against them. Now, let's talk a bit about some recent cases that we have been able to identify and highlight within our slides. In high-risk regions such as Red Sea, Persian Gulf, and the Strait of Hormuz, vessels have frequently been reporting GNSS interference and spoofing. The affected systems include GPS, AIS, and indirectly integrated bridge systems. Operationally, this results in degraded situational awareness, increased collision risks, and a reliance on manual navigation methods. Regulators responded by issuing navigation warnings, reinforcing the importance of operational resilience as outlined within IMO and Ajax requirements that we will discuss further on in the slides. In the Baltic Sea, a damage to a submarine telecommunications cable highlighted the vulnerability of critical maritime digital infrastructure. Although the incident involved physical interference, the impact was digital and telecommunication disruptions with strategic implications. This is the case that illustrates how cyber and physical risks converge, particularly in geopolitical sensitive regions. And one of the, I would characterize it, one of the most important incidents happening in December. In France, a passenger ferry experienced a malware incident involving a remote access Trojan. While there was no immediate safety or navigation impact, the integrity of the shipboard IT systems was compromised. This incident reinforces that insider threats and human factors remain critical and that cybersecurity governance on board vessels must be robust. If you all scan the QR that you see here, you will see that this has been registered in a maritime cyber incident database. It provides the exact information that most of you should be aware of, that highlights that indeed cybersecurity threat is not an external factor, but it can also come from the inside. And this is why we are trying to gain and raise the awareness that cybersecurity is entitled to. As you see, 2 crew members have been detained for having installed onboard Raspberry Pis that have been detected by an EDR solution, impacting the cybersecurity of the overall vessel architecture, and of course could be a potential threat to the human safety, as we are talking about a passenger ferry. More information you can find online on the website if you scan the QR, as I said. I'm having an issue with moving on with my slides. I don't know if the slides are changing. Okay, now it's unstuck. Sorry about that. I hope we haven't been attacked or something. So, moving on to the maritime challenges, we see that across the industry, we have three major challenges that persist. First, cybersecurity awareness and training. The human elements, the human element, as you see, remains the number one factor in cyber incidents. I explained the recent case in France before. So no matter how technically well prepared you are, you're only one click away from being impacted. Second is compliance with all the evolving regulations, including IMO, the Ajax Unified Requirement, local regulations, as NIS2 here in Europe. We have USCG in the US and many more in other regions. And third challenge is the lack of specialized cybersecurity expertise tailored to the maritime environments. Addressing these challenges is not a one-time exercise, but it's a continuous process where we are dedicated to be there by your side to support you by having a big presence all over the world, ensuring expertise all over the world. At the moment, we have more than 300 experts on OT, IT, cybersecurity, and we are here by your side to assist you on your cybersecurity journey ahead. Now, a big focus should be on the maritime regulations landscape. We have been communicating since day one that Ajax was about to release unified requirements. These unified requirements have been applicable since 1st of July 2024. We are talking about URI 26 and URI 27 that are addressing cybersecurity for vessels and systems at a very early stage at the design level. However, the application of these regulations is not a one-off. That means that the responsibility coming from yard that is responsible for designing a cyber secure vessel will be transferred to the owner that needs to ensure constant up-to-date documentation and constant up-to-date maintenance on the systems on board. And this is something that will continue throughout the whole life cycle of the vessel. For ships in service, we have IMO resolution MSC 428. However, MSC 428 is not focusing that much on the technical aspect. It's focusing more on the human element and the cybersecurity awareness on crew members on board the vessel. At the same time, we have regional guidelines. As I mentioned before, USCG. USCG is cybersecurity regulation from deriving from the U.S. Coast Guard. U.S. Coast Guard has been recently releasing guidelines on how to implement these rules. There is a constant, I would say, audit from regional port authorities, from regional entities regarding compliance with USCG. We have in Singapore the Singapore Cybersecurity Act, which is a very technical document applicable only for in the Singapore region. In Europe, we have NIS2 directive, which is not applicable on vessels. However, it finds applicability to ship owners, shipping companies, and ship management operators. And at the same time, Ajax recommendations are here to assist us on strengthening and cyber securing the maritime industry. The reason for having all these regulations coming constantly is that evolution is progressing, and therefore regulations need to progress in order not to deviate and in order to be able to protect our assets the way that we should. So non-compliance now carries operational, financial, and reputational consequences. And this is where we need to enhance and enforce our presence. For that reason, we have developed a comprehensive cyber services portfolio. This is to ensure that all marine stakeholders are properly supported, and our portfolio includes cyber drills and tabletop exercises, risk assessments, threat modeling, penetration testing, and regulatory compliance support. Our global network of experts that I mentioned before across OT, IT, and IoT cybersecurity ensures practical and maritime specific solutions. However, from all these cyber services that you see here, our focus today will be on cyber drills and tabletop crisis management simulations. And for that, I would pass the ball to my colleague, Luke, to give you his insights and further information.
Thank you very much, Panos, for doing a sterling job. Good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, wherever you're joining from. As introduced at the start by Niels, my name is Luke Fletcher, and I'm a principal cyber crisis management consultant with Bureau Veritas. So that essentially means I help organizations like yourselves plan, train, and exercise for major cyber events. And just to tell you a little bit about our department, we have cybersecurity specialists, as Panos said, around the world that specialize in certain domains. So whether that's industrial, finance, technology, healthcare, for example. But our global cyber crisis department crosses all those sectors and works on a global level. So we provide these tabletops or live simulations for organizations across all sectors. Interestingly, over the last sort of 12, 18 months, we've seen a significant increase in requests from our maritime customers who've been coming to us to ask for support, not just with planning and training for cyber events, but largely with running simulations. So whether that's for introductory tabletops or more complex live simulations, we've seen a noticeable uptick, and specifically around running cyber simulations that involve vessels being compromised. And so for this part of the presentation, I'm going to give you a little bit of background on what I mean by cyber crisis management, and then talk a little bit about the case studies that we've been supporting our customers in within the maritime sector. So first, at a very high level, the cyber drill or the tabletop crisis service that we offer is essentially a simulated incident that we run with different levels of the organization. So either operational teams, more global cyber incident teams, or the strategic crisis team. And it really puts plans into practice, allows individuals to practice their role in an incident so that they can learn lessons from it, and really challenges and makes it more realistic for those organizations that are looking to make sure that they're really prepared for some kind of major crisis. Who's it specifically for? Well, as I say, we run it for organizations across all sectors, but in the maritime sector specifically, we've been working with cruise ship companies, organizations that have LNGs, container and logistics companies, towage companies. So it's really applicable to organizations across the maritime sector. We also work with organizations at different levels of maturity. So for some, it might be the first exercise that they've run. For others, they may have a robust, comprehensive exercise program in place, and they're bringing us in to really stress test themselves and learn some valuable lessons. Now, the way that we approach these simulations and what makes us a little bit different is we make sure they are very realistic. So by that, I mean, we have cybersecurity experts that operate specifically in the maritime division. They spend their time trying to hack or compromise maritime organizations, even in many cases going on board vessels and seeing how they could potentially compromise it from an insider perspective. And we use a lot of the outputs of that in our simulations. We also have a 24/7 incident response function that provides us some insight from their live incident responses. And we try to factor in real life case studies. If you take the example Panos mentioned earlier around the GNV fantastic ferry that was detained in France earlier this year. And then one of the other things that we look at is the cross-functional coordination. So when there's some kind of major cyber crisis event, particularly if a vessel was to be compromised, for example, it's not just the IT team that ends up responding. You need a good coordinated response from your IT department, your cybersecurity colleagues, the emergency response team on the vessel, perhaps your supplier response teams. Maybe you have a global marine coordination center, your global crisis team. They all need to work together in these incidents. And so we try to run these simulations that bring those different departments together. And ultimately, we're trying to find those gaps in the response so that we can identify lessons learned and plug those gaps. Now, there's probably a long list of benefits that I could give you to running these simulations, but ultimately they improve your readiness and your resilience for these events. If you've never run a simulation before and then you face an incident, you're really learning some hard lessons for the first time. But if you've ran some of these simulations multiple times before, you're very ready for an incident if it was to be experienced. And then ultimately, you're reducing the financial and the reputational consequences of an incident the more effectively that you can manage that crisis. This slide then is just to articulate our holistic approach to cyber crisis management. So to put it into context, if you look at the incident in the middle, typically when a cyber incident occurs, you have some initial detection and initial response that takes place, maybe from your internal teams or perhaps from a third-party incident response function. And hopefully they effectively manage to contain and eradicate that threat. However, if it escalates beyond that, you've not been able to contain that threat, it spins into a crisis. It involves many other different departments and, very importantly, your executive strategic team that are now going to have to make some fairly strategic decisions to try to preserve the viability of your organization. And ultimately, at the same time, you then have your different business departments that are activating their business continuity plans to try to keep some level of minimum critical business function running. Now, each of those three domains requires governance policy. They require their own plans and procedures, their own training, and specific exercises, either exercises for the incident response team, exercises for the strategic crisis team, or the business continuity teams. And ultimately, they want to learn lessons and try to improve their response for future reference. Now, this slide just puts it in a little bit more context. So there are terms that are often used interchangeably, whether it's an issue, an incident, a major incident, a crisis, or a disaster. And more often than not, when we're running these simulations, we're trying to focus on the crisis side. So incidents of a very severe nature. And if you look at the description here, which is taken from the International Crisis Standard, which is ISO 22361, they put a lot of emphasis on the strategic response requirement and decisions that preserve the viability of the organization. So really focusing on that, if we don't respond to this effectively, we may cease to exist as an organization in the coming months. And if you look around the outer edges of the box, we're looking at those incidents that are extraordinary, so very rare. They require a strategic level of response. They're pretty low in their frequency, and the impact is fairly existential or has the potential to be. Now, how that links into real life case studies, going back to the incident that Panos was talking about earlier, what you had on the back of that incident was lots of news articles that popped up. And that gives you some insight into the level of interest and the level of complexity, the level of severity behind that incident. And as Panos said, there was no safety concerns on the back of it, or swift action was taken to make sure there was no safety concerns. But the question is, what was the potential? What's the what if? What could have happened? And when you see these incidents pop up, there's lots of questions that come up, like if there's many news articles, how do we handle the media pressure? I have no doubt the communications team in the background were being inundated by requests from journalists. You have thousands of passengers on the ferry, perhaps their family are trying to find out what's happening. Your IT team then are trying to investigate how far this could have potentially spread. You have individuals contemplating the safety on board the vessel. Maybe they're looking at decisions around, could this have affected other vessels? Do they need to make some fairly sharp decisions on what to do with other vessels? You're going to have partners and suppliers asking lots of questions. So ultimately, all these questions lead to responses and input from many different areas of the business. And that's really where the effective coordination and cooperation across the business is really important. And we try to help a number of organizations in the maritime sector try to build these global cross-coordination crisis frameworks. And so many organizations follow this operational, tactical, strategic methodology. And so if we start at the bottom left, you may have a vessel incident response team. So they may be used to dealing with vessel-related emergencies. In many cases, they probably run drills every week around incidents going wrong on that vessel, whether it's a cruise ship or it's a container vessel. You might have a port incident response team, which may be managed internally or by another organization that are looking at specifically the operations around the port. You might have an IT team looking at more internal technological incidents. Perhaps there's a facilities team dealing with issues that might be arising at the office. And then if there's a supplier, particularly if you have some critical technology suppliers and they face some kind of incident like a major ransomware attack, for example, you may have a team that comes together to investigate the impacts of that supplier being compromised. Now, all of those teams in one big incident could all be working in tandem. You then have a tactical layer where if you're a global maritime organization, perhaps you have regional crisis teams across countries or continents. You might have a cybersecurity incident response team made up of different areas of the business, perhaps with some support from a security operations center and a contract with a third-party incident response firm. And then ultimately, when it escalates to the top layer, you have your strategic crisis team, who often have some support from a crisis communications department and some external legal counsel. Now, what's interesting is to have an effective response to a major cyber crisis, you need all of these different layers of the business to have the right plans and procedures in place. They have to have been trained in their roles, and they all have to exercise. And not just exercise individually, but exercise together. Because if they're operating and exercising in different ways, when there's an incident that involves many of them, then the coordination and the situational awareness can be disrupted. And this just illustrates that there's lots of different ways in which an organization can exercise their plans. We have this kind of maturity matrix, and we have some customers that come to us and say, in a year's time or in 3 years' time, we want to be ready for the worst cyber incident that any company has ever faced. And we know that's a maturity journey over time. So we often suggest making sure the plans are in place and there's some training. Then there's some kind of discussion-based exercise on the plan that's a little bit more informal. You might have a tabletop that's a little bit more interactive. It's with one team. Maybe it lasts something like half a day. Then escalating up to a full live exercise, maybe with multiple teams. Maybe it lasts a little longer, right through to gold teaming exercise, multi-day exercises, and exercises that involve your third parties, ultimately trying to get you prepped and ready for that worst case cyber scenario. So that provides just a little bit of context. And what I'd like to do is give you some insights into how we've been supporting our customers in this cyber drill space. They've been running these drills in lots of different contexts, different maturity levels, different styles. And so hopefully those listening can take some inspiration from what others are doing. And if you have any questions, of course, on these at the end, then please feel free to ask. So firstly, a little case study about a company that we work with, one of the largest energy companies in the world. They have a huge marine services department, and they look after a number of ports in the Middle East. And they came to us first because they wanted us to support them in conducting some penetration tests on vessels that were docking in the port. So we had a team of cybersecurity experts that went out to the Middle East and performed some pen tests on these vessels. We then used the output of those penetration tests to design some crisis simulations. And we ran a full-day live simulation with their port emergency team. So the one that was responsible for coordinating all the vessels that were coming into the port on a daily basis. And they wanted to simulate a third-party vessel being compromised as it was coming into the port. We had a team of facilitators that traveled over and coordinated the exercise on site. And then we had a team of role players who were based back in Europe, up in the early hours of the morning to accommodate the local time in the Middle East, delivering injects remotely to ship captains, to the port emergency team, to members of the different business units that were involved in the exercise. And that's what I would class as more of an operational level exercise. The next case study then I want to talk about is more of a tactical level exercise. So we had a customer who came to us first because they wanted us to run some NIS2 boardroom training programs for their executive team, so they could be educated on their responsibilities as a board with regards to the new NIS2 regulations. They then wanted to educate and upskill their wider senior management team on not just NIS2, but also on the compliance with NIS2 by running these tabletop simulations. So we had 2 half-day tabletops that we ran. One was for their tactical business team in the UK, and one was for their team in the Netherlands. And this was made up of business unit managers from different departments like HR, procurement, finance, for example. And this one, they wanted to focus less on a vessel incident, but more on an internal typical ransomware scenario, so that we could educate their senior leadership on the kind of tactics that the cyber criminal gangs will use. The third case study I'd like to give then is a little bit more on the strategic side. So we had a particular customer who came to us and said they wanted to run a crisis management level exercise with the executive team of a heavy cargo transport company. And the key thing they wanted to run the simulation on was following lessons learned from some recent incidents around vessel compromises. And they knew that they had a fairly robust emergency response procedure in place for vessel-related physical incidents, but they wanted to see how that all came together and what it looked like at a strategic level. So we ran a 4-hour exercise for their executive team, and we know it's always a challenge to try to get executives in the room. So getting them together for a 4-hour exercise shows their commitment to trying to be ready for something like this. And we tailored the injects and the material so it was very specific and more at a strategic level, whereas for the operational exercises, we make them much more technical. Now, the final case study I'd like to give you is a cruise liner that we work with. And we've done a couple of exercises with them. And as you can see at the top, they span the strategic, tactical, and operational layer. So for some drills that we worked with them on in 2024, we ran a couple of exercises that lasted a full day each, and they involved multiple different business areas. So we had the cyber response team, we had their global Maritime Center, Crisis Coordination Center. We also had the ship captain and individuals participating from the vessel itself. And then in 2025, on the back of that complex scenario, they wanted to do something a bit more technical and a bit more locally focused. So we looked at the compromise of a third-party satellite system, similar to the incident that occurred late last year in Iran. And so this involved just their security operations center, cyber response team, and maritime response unit. And for these exercises, we had individuals participating from different parts of the world from an organization perspective. And then we had our central crisis team delivering injects and updates for the exercise in Europe. So that's kind of 4 key case studies. Each individual one had its own report, and of course there were specific lessons learned for that organization. We've now been working with them to implement those recommendations. But what I wanted to share with you is some common lessons learned so that you could try to implement these before you actually face an exercise or face an incident itself, of course. So one of the key things is that we often see organizations trying to run before they walk. So I showed you that graph earlier of the planning and the training and the different types of exercises. We sometimes have customers that come to us and want to run a large, complex exercise, but our recommendation is always to start small and improve that maturity over time. Otherwise, you're setting individuals up a little bit to fail. Sometimes then there's a little bit of a lack of a crisis framework. So particularly in the maritime sector, we see that there's a lot of operational response plans, emergency response procedures. In some cases, the cyber incident response is kind of only just starting out. and in other areas the response can be a little less. So having a crisis framework that brings that all together, make sure they're not all siloed, and shows how all of those pieces of the puzzle will come together in a crisis is definitely effective. And as I mentioned, we see the physical response being very effective quite often in maritime, and the cyber just starting out. So we say, don't try to reinvent the wheel. If you've got emergency response procedures in place and they are fit for purpose, let them roll out into the other departments and try to use some of that consistency, because when it gets to the top and the executive team are involved, whether it's a cyber incident or it's a physical incident of some kind, usually their processes and procedures are somewhat similar. There's also a big drive at the minute to try to integrate suppliers and partners. Many have huge supply chains, and whether that's for the support for critical services or whether that's suppliers that provide specific support, such as maybe third-party media contracts or cyber incident response support, involve them in your exercises. What you don't want is to have a contract with a third-party media provider, for example, for 5 years, and then when the incident occurs, you bring them in on that contract and you find they're not really fit for purpose, or they weren't providing the service that you assumed they were going to provide. So get them in early, get them to exercise, and see what they're like. The other thing is we see quite often too long documents, long 100-page crisis plans that nobody ever reads. And then when we come to these simulations, no one's even using the plan anyway. So we recommend keep them short, keep them concise, keep them very specific to the team. Don't try to write one plan for every team in the business. And then ultimately, one of the worst mistakes that we sometimes see is that when we come in and we run an exercise, maybe we did the exercise the year before, if the lessons learned haven't been implemented from the last exercise, we can almost predict what the lessons learned are going to be this time. So if you are running these drills, make sure you learn those lessons on the back of them and implement them and take action on the back of it. And with that, I will hand over back to Panos to give you some key takeaways.
Thanks, Luke. I hope our attendees found that as enlightening as I did myself. Even though we are working together and we are doing these drills together, it's always nice to see what we are able to accomplish. I think what's worth mentioning here is that we have been talking about compliance. We have been talking about cybersecurity within maritime. Most of our clients, and what I see is that everyone is considering themselves mature enough, either because they have a well-established IT department or they have quite automated solutions on their premises or on board their vessels. But trust me, the kind of simulations that we are able to perform are the ones that will actually help you validate your policies, identify your gaps, and ensure how that the systems you're operating and the vessels you're operating are secure enough. And we see that no matter how mature someone thinks they are on cybersecurity, there's always a way to enter. And my suggestion here would be to try and put everything in action. Instead of having your policies only on the paper, try to find ways to validate your policies. Try to find ways to validate the technical controls that you've implemented. And that is purely my suggestion. So to conclude, I think that everyone knows and everyone is quite keen on the fact that maritime cybersecurity is no longer optional. Cyber resilience underpins safety, operational continuity, regulatory compliance, and trust among all the stakeholders of the maritime supply chain. Organizations that proactively invest on cybersecurity, they are better positioned to navigate both the cyber threats and at the same time the regulatory complexity. So we would like to invite you to engage with us and strengthen your cyber posture and prepare for the challenges ahead. New regulations are coming, new threats are coming. AI now is in the game, and it's only making things easier, not only from a operational point of view, but also from a malicious point of view. AI usage is everywhere, not only to smooth and soothe operations. It's also there to create new ransomware, to create new pathways of attack. So try to strengthen your cyber posture and try to be prepared. That is my suggestion, and I would like to thank you all for your attention today on our webinar.
Thank you, Panos. Thank you, Luke. I think these were some really good insights in what we are providing and what lessons learned should be for others. We got some nice questions already. I would like to invite you, if you have any further questions, please put them in the Q&A. We will try to answer, of course, as much as possible. If we don't get through all of them, of course, we will follow up afterwards. Just to remind you, the slides are now published in the head-on section, so you can download them there, and then, of course, you will get the recording of the webinar afterwards. So maybe we start with the questions. So Panos already started answering some. I would like to start with the first one here. Which recommended IAC standards should be considered by manufacturers of shipboard machinery on top of URE 27?
Well, at the moment, for maritime equipment, the only applicable standard that you see is URE 27. However, URE 27 derives from IEC 62443. So the majority of the requirements within E27 are based on 62443 3-3 and 4-1. Now, the IEC 62443 3-3 comes with different levels of cyber maturity. You can always try to achieve a greater level than level 1, which corresponds to URE 27, but it's something that is not requested in a mandatory way. So my suggestion would be to see how strong and how you can strengthen your cybersecurity on the system based on the levels of maturity of the IEC standard.
Thanks, Panos. Another one. So, are you sending tests to vessels, phishing, deepfake, etc.?
Yeah, I can. I was just reading that question. I can answer that one, Niels. And the answer is yes, we are. And in fact, actually, I work quite closely with our awareness and behavior team. We have a team of exceptional psychologists who work alongside us to look more at the behavioral side of cybersecurity. And we have a team that perform, phishing tests, but also social engineering. So I know we have a team who even recently have worked with the Maritime Organization to see if they could potentially even get on vessels and, sneak their way on, see what they could potentially do if they were a cyber criminal gang of some kind. And performing phishing tests and all those kind of social engineering activities, voice phishing, whatever it is it might be. We do those for the maritime sector.
Yeah, thanks, Luke. Regarding risk compliance assessment, is there any recommendation on platforms to be used, like Venta, Intuitum, any others?
Yeah, so as class society, we cannot suggest any kind of platforms to be used. However, my recommendation approach would be to instead of choosing a platform based on the popularity, try to have some kind of questions being asked and let's say being met by the platform. So for instance, if you're able to integrate with any IT OT systems already existing, what is the level of automation required, what is the customization needed, what kind of compliance with what kind of regulations compliance is achieved. So there are many criteria to be considered for that. So I would urge you to think about this criteria instead of trying to navigate you towards a platform.
Yeah, thanks, Panos. Maybe another one for you.
Yeah.
In light of CRA FAQ, is the EU Cyber Resilience Act simultaneously applicable together with your E27 requirements?
Yeah. Is something that is not, I would say it's excluding marine type systems. For EU, we know that MED certification supersedes URE 27. We are trying at Ajax level at the moment to have further clarifications and see what is the I would say the benchmarking with CRA and see where URE 27 fits in. So for that, I would really urge you to be patient until we have the proper feedback from the EU regulation entities to be more precise, right?
Yeah, thanks, Panos. Not sure, maybe that's for Luke. Do we have any previous experience or involvement in offshore industry, FPSO, FSOs, any others?
Yeah, so we definitely do have experience in the offshore sector. We have teams of individuals that have been involved in lots of different exercises, and the offshore industry specifically. I'll respond to your answer with a link. We actually recently ran in the Netherlands a major exercise in cooperation with some representatives from the Dutch government, the National Cybersecurity Centre, where we were bringing many different organizations in the supply chain for the offshore wind sector together to see how they might respond to an incident that impacted many organizations in that sector. So yeah, we've got a lot of experience in the offshore industry and lots of different domains, and even exercises where we bring different companies together in cooperation with government entities. But I'll provide a link to a case study for that in the chat.
Yeah, thanks, Luke. Yeah, I think we have a wide scope where we can provide all these services and where we have experience with. Another question, this direction, I think, is this also something we can do for pleasure charter yachts?
I think from an exercise perspective, absolutely. We can do it for, there's not many companies I don't think we can do it for. So whether it's a strategic crisis team, an operational crisis team, the way in which we run the simulations, we can do, whether it's if it's a charter or yacht company, but more specifically from a cyber perspective, I don't know if Panos, you might have some more insights on what we do from a non-exercise perspective for that area.
No. Yeah, I don't see any kind of limitation on where we could be running drills. So I believe that this kind of cyber awareness exercises is a way to ensure that you're protecting your assets, and at the same time people are aware of cybersecurity. So it doesn't matter what the scope is. So if we're talking about cruise luxury yachts, if we're talking about LNG carriers, if we're talking about bulk carriers, if we're talking about anything. So it's a way to actually validate what you have on paper. And this is something that identifies gaps and allows you to mitigate those gaps, to be surely protected. So we should not limit ourselves on the scope of applicability of such services here.
Yeah, thanks for this clear answer. Another one. How could we request a one-day cyber drill such as the one described?
Easy. Send us an email. Either that email that you can see on the screen, or if you want to contact us directly, be more than happy to give you some insights into how we can do it.
Yeah, exactly. So if you are interested, just give us a message. You can reach us directly. Are there any specific requirements for firewalls, UTM, for protection or OT devices? For example, OT fingerprinting, protocol recognition, flight operations, commands, etc.
Well, from a mandatory point of view, no. From a mandatory point of view, we have URE 26 at the moment, focusing on the vessels, and URE 27 focusing on the systems. However, as a class society, we're always trying to, let's say, to increase our presence and increase our presence towards cybersecurity for clients or customers that they want to be more secure and implement more stringent technical controls. There is no limit again on what kind of equipment is being used. For instance, on the firewalling, our suggestion is always to be using new gen firewall or any kind of access control management or MFAs are more than welcome. And if you take, for instance, UR 26, it actually highlights the usage of MFA. However, it does not put any thresholds. So the owner, the maker is able to implement any kind of MFA that they see it's suited or it is more easily, let's say, accessible when the vessel is sailing. For shoreside, things are even simpler. But think about a vessel sailing in the middle of the ocean with a recurrency of 6 months changing crew. So some of the the MFAs are not easy to implement. So we have to be pragmatic and at the same time to be able to ensure that the controls are properly implemented on board.
Yeah, thanks, Panos. I think another one for you. Class societies sometimes require topology diagrams to observe cybersecurity resilience of the system. Does standalone equipment contains programming ports and USB also to be considered?
The short answer is yes. So having a standalone equipment for sure ensures that your network is somehow protected in case of any kind of malware attack. So imagine you having a crew member on board, plugging a USB on the loading computer. However, even if the loading computer is not connected on the network, you might impact operations. So you might not impact the safety of the crew. So you have to consider that there are two factors. So you have the operational factor and then you have the business factor. Whether the system is isolated or not, one of these two factors is always impacted. So it is a best approach to always have a logical or physical protection against any kind of unwanted devices to be plugged in. So even though this is not required, it's a best practice. So we should be highlighting and following the best practices as well, rather than ticking a box on a checklist with requirements coming from regulations.
Yeah, thanks, Panos. Maybe one question for Luke regarding, we are talking about marinas on board, which their contracts are circulating constantly and usually not well IT oriented. Do you believe that some kind of playbooks over cybersecurity incident response with quick steps to take rather than having a full document to learn would be good?
Yeah, it's a very valid question, and my response would actually be a little bit of both. So when we support organizations in the space, we normally say, try to start at the top with a policy or a framework and make that the long-winded document with all the non-emergency or non-critical information in. So who owns the response? What are the expectations in terms of training and exercising? What is the framework and the structure like? Keep all that in that framework policy document that maybe you review with the committee once a year or something. Then at the next layer down, have a plan and have a plan for each team. So whether it's the vessel response team, it's the cybersecurity incident response team, keep that short, keep it short, list who's in the team and what their roles and responsibilities are. Then the next layer down, have playbooks that are a bit more specific for a scenario, maybe relatively high level for cyber incidents or whatever the other incident might be that is for anyone who's non-technical. So a little bit of a high level on what might be involved in a cyber incident, what are the decisions that they might need to make, and that kind of thing. And then at the next layer is where you have your run books, the far more technically orientated specifics on maybe what a technical team might need to do on board that vessel. And if you have those kind of 4 layers, the top one's where all the core content is and the stuff that's not that critical in an incident. And as you go further down, you have just very more specific pieces of information for those individuals, and much shorter and much sharper. At least that's the advice that we follow.
Yeah, thanks for your comprehensive answer. Maybe another one for Panos. Is URE 22 and URE 26 usually a requirement from yard to equipment manufacturers, especially for cruise ships?
First of all, there are not specific requirements for cruise ships. Then URE 22 is a system-based set of requirements. URE 26 is a vessel-based set of requirements. URE 26 requires that the systems integrated on board new builds signed for construction after 1st of July 2024 are in compliance with URE 27. That means that yard, in order to ensure that the vessel is properly designed and securely designed, the systems need to be cyber secure by design as well. Yard is not requesting system manufacturers based on their own approach. This is what the regulation requires. This is what Ajax dictates. And we see that not something that is a pain, but we see it as an enabler to ensure that systems are secure, and therefore the vessels are properly designed and securely designed to sail.
Yeah, thanks, Panos. Maybe another one. I don't know if that's something for you, Luke or Panos. We incorporate defense in depth with network segregation, application whitelisting, USB port scanning, endpoint protection, network monitoring, scanning, dual firewalls, etc., but still see various degrees of knowledge by onboard inspectors who may raise an observation if an USB port block is missing. How do you manage this?
Yes. So first of all, it's good to have observations, because an observation is there to show to you that you're deviating from something. So it's always good to have, because an observation is something that you can mitigate. Second of all, and I will speak only from BV point of view, because inspections can occur from flag, can occur from port state controls, could occur from right ship. From BV point of view, our inspectors are undergoing a recurrent training on cybersecurity to ensure their audit process is flawless in terms of cybersecurity. So, indeed, you might be implementing the most stringent requirements and technical controls on board your vessel. But if you find one USB port on your ECDIS not being blocked, and ECDIS being a critical system, so imagine what happens if you just put a USB that has been plugged in a workstation somewhere outside the vessel, and you just pollute your ECDIS. So even one minor point as a minor port blocker, you might consider it insignificant, but it plays a crucial role for navigation on board the vessel. So keep in mind that these observations are here to bring awareness and to strengthen our cyber posture. So you should be welcoming them.
Yeah, thanks, Panos. I think that's right. Maybe the last one, looking at the time. So I don't know who can take this one. Could you cite an incident, if any, of an OT cyber attack, and how assets had been affected? What action had been taken? How operators could have prevented them?
Yeah, sure. I can have a go at this one, and then maybe Panos, if there's anything you want to add, feel free. But it's quite an interesting question, because we have a team of OT specialists and provide training in the OT space, and have case studies that they use in some of their training on OT attacks. The reality is the number of actual OT attacks is relatively low at the minute, but the case studies that we have are pretty extreme. And I think there's a lot of concern around what could potentially come in that space, and what threat groups could potentially do if they're able to compromise OT environments. In terms of specific case studies, I mean, if you look at the one Panos talked about previously, with GMV Fantastic and the remote access Trojan. You've probably got, if you look at the incident that happened in Poland recently, so there's lots of noise and lots of articles coming out at the minute on what some kind of likely nation state actor was able to do in Poland in terms of the energy system, bringing down offshore wind farms, bringing down parts of the power grid. There's a lot of questions around what could have potentially happened, and of course what they've done now to try to prevent it from happening again. There's also a number of other case studies, but you have the power plant in Ukraine, for example, that was also compromised. Lots of lessons learned in each of them. Each one probably has a report. There's probably a long technical list around what they could have done and what they have done since. But ultimately, from my perspective, there's lots of specifics to every incident, but ensuring that you run scenarios around what could potentially happen in your OT environments and then how your teams would respond. I mean, that's where you're really going to get the lessons learned.
Yeah. Thank you, Luke. Thanks, Panos. Thanks for the interesting feedbacks. And I think we are well on time to close the session. Thanks for all the participants who have joined the webinar. I hope we will see you in the next PV webinar as well. So have a good day and see you.
Thank you all for joining.